Welcome back to this week's episode of The Well House Exorcism. I am your amazing hostess, Shanna.
I'm PJ.
And our returning champion. You're welcome.
Kyle Thatcher. Very nice to be here. Second visit. Thank you.
See, at least he has a cool tagline. I told you in the last one, I set you up for some really good ones. And you go, I'm PJ. I'm John.
I'm just doing it on purpose.
I
now.
know you are. And I'm just like, well, that fell flat. At least Kyle gets it. Welcome back, Kyle.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Honest answer. How do you feel about your intro music to
the only
Creepy Thoughts
person to
with
have
Kyle?
intro music?
The only person
of all three shows.
All three.
It's pronounced Ouija.
He said it. He said the thing.
Said a thing. He's doing the bit. You know, someday we're gonna be rich and famous, and everyone's gonna be like, "We love Kyle." And I'm like, "I've been here the whole time. It's my it's my podcast. Me over here, the hostess."
That's okay. Eventually, you know, when I have plans to do a couple of podcasts possibly, and we're going to do our own thing. So I'll transfer any fandom over to that, and then you guys can have.
We could have mashup podcasts.
No, I want to be on there. I want to have sassy something with Shannon, what do we do? Alliteration, creepy thoughts with Kyle, right? The K sounds.
Well, I talked to not to plug it too much, but I have the idea that I'm working on with my best friend, where we talk about horror movies,
which I definitely want to be a part of for some of those.
Yeah, and
sounds like fun.
And so I don't know if you want me to say the name.
Yeah, go for
you
it.
Can go ahead.
Plug away.
Yeah,
we
so
plug podcasts every week, and I don't get paid for it.
We're still working. We're still working on the format and getting everything worked out technically. But we're going to call it Nosferatu Dudes.
I'm so glad you stuck with that.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I'm also I was thinking about doing one with Jen possibly as like a kind of a side bit. And I didn't want to step on your toes as queen of the paranormal.
I'm not the queen of the paranormal, but
but
I want to go to heaven one day.
I
dabble.
I'm super interested in liminal events, like interdimensional, like weird disappearances, things like that. Like
you can go on his podcast for all your weird crap you like.
Ultra
yes.
dimensionals.
Yes.
You know, which can loop into cryptids, but it wouldn't be like a cryptid.
You can take all the
podcast.
cryptids. I gift it to you.
But like Mothman.
Yeah, there you
when
go.
You talk about ultra dimensionals, like
you hear about the
Mothman
woman who has a
that.
chupacabra stuffed, and it has been tested from scientists from around the world.
No, because it's not going to be on this podcast. It's going to be on his.
But that one,
It'll be the third episode.
The working title for that one I just came up with tonight, and I think we might call it Liminal Unlimited.
Ooh, I like it.
So that's where, you know.
And once you've established yourself, episode 3-ish is going to be the Chupacabra, and we'll send PJ over as your resident expert. Shoot, I'll get a water spin, water gun. Anyway, tonight we brought you back because I pulled out your book again because I love reading their book. But so we're going to go back to Ghost Stories of the Lehigh Valley, who you are the resident expert because y'all lived there.
Yeah, a little bit.
a little bit, a couple years here or there. And we're going to talk about two places in particular. One you are very well versed in because Kyle's a naughty boy and he's been there.
Yeah.
It is?
Hexenkopf Rock.
Excellent. And then the second one will be Hawk Mountain, which ties in, and I'll talk about how it ties in. So today's podcast won't be the usual where we discuss why places are haunted and then move into the story. It's going to be two different, very well-known areas for us. I also want to kind of say that you see some of these stories over here in our area too. So as I was reading all of this and getting ready for this week's research, I kind of felt like as people kind of moved westerly more in Pennsylvania, the stories continued, and you have these haunted rocks everywhere. Or you have we have just driving out to Catawissa, there's the Indian Head Rock. There's these places and there's these haunted locations on mountains because they're mystical, and the Native Americans, they're doing their their powwows and whatnot. And so these stories just perpetuated as you go more westerly, even out to Duquesne and out to Pittsburgh and Erie. They all still exist.
Well, even as I was reading about Hexenkopf, it made me think of Suicide Forest in Japan. Yep. Where it's this creepy place with this weird background and mysterious lore behind it, where there've just been this undaunting number of suicides in the area. Yeah, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little more as we talk about it. But
yeah, I think there's a weird crossover that happens between, number one, I mean, people just had a tendency to identify places. It's like back, I mean, not everybody had a map. Not everybody had like an established map with them. So it's like if you wanted to tell somebody like where to go or where to meet up or whatever, it's like
landmarks.
Yeah, it's like oh yeah, go to Hexenkopf Rock, and
You'll
then
see it glows. There's witches.
Yeah, and then you're gonna turn north and go 2 more miles.
Yeah,
take
and
a
that's
right
where
of
the
the
place
creepy,
is.
Lenny Lenape burned down village, and then take a right over by the.
But then I think that crosses over with. I think there are those places that, for whatever reason, whether that was intention of local people or whether like a suicide forest, I think that there's something to be said for. There are places that harbor negativity.
Oh yeah.
Just like there's certain places you go to and they're like, you hear, choirs and they're inspiring and you feel nothing but positivity. There are places that you go, like, you can think about it simply like, Star Wars, like light side and dark side. There are some places that hold negativity.
Well, and you think like with your gut too, there's a lot of, like, that's just before, like on this podcast, that current research in the gut and how all of our emotions come from our gut. And if our gut is out of sorts, the rest of our body is actually out of sorts. But like there's something to be said, like you walk into a room and you go, I don't want to be here. Like that's your gut telling you negative space, get out.
Yeah.
So Hexenkopf, I feel like, is one of those locations where it doesn't sound scary. And like reading the different research, some people are just not worried about it. Other people are freaked out by it. So
it's actually beautiful.
Yeah.
It's actually a very pretty place to visit.
And so actually one of my articles, I only printed it because it was so funny. This person named Priscilla Kinter, she lives there. And so this is in the Orion newspaper and I should say magazine. So if you go on to orionmagazine.org, you'll actually see it. But she's kind of sassy about it. She's like, apparently it's like imbued with all this terrible stuff. But the end of it, she says this. It makes me giggle as I hit my mic. Perhaps it's ironic that I never knew our hill was supposed to be cursed or haunted or harrowing in any way. I never heard about headless ghosts or contagion winds, about mysterious lights and sounds in trees. Never knew anything of it until I was decades older and far away. So I just, it's interesting. If you live there, she says it's a beautiful place. It's densely wooded. You can see beautiful birds there, flowers. Isn't there like a lot of like herbs that grow up there naturally too?
That's what one of the articles said. Yeah.
Yeah. When we went, my friends and I, it was probably a group of about, I want to say maybe 8 of us almost. And we went and visited during the day. There was no way we were going to go up there at night.
Smart, see.
We also, well, just for the
Plus
fact,
safety, right?
Well, yeah, just for the fact that we're like, okay, this is like kind of a mini mountain, and we're like, we don't want to be climbing. I was
going to ask how big it was. Yeah,
that's put in here. They actually give you all those stats. So it is peak elevation 791 feet, isolated prominence on a ridge of South Mountain. There you go.
Yeah, there's like a long draw, like when you go from the road, which is Hexenkopf Road.
Mm-hmm.
When you go from the road and go up into the woods, there's a long sloping draw as you go up. So part of that elevation you don't necessarily experience right away because you're just kind of walking uphill and it's a
Does it
shallow
seem like it's kind of
incline.
man-made because they've walked it so many times? I think it's because it's been traversed.
Oh no! It's like a natural formed location. So like it a long slope up, and then once you get there, it's sort of like it has more of the feel of like a boulder field.
Oh, okay.
Like it and stacked. So it is like this little mini mountain, and you have to climb up it. There you can't just like stroll up. You can't just do like a little hike. You actually have to like get up on the rocks and like climb up to different places.
That reminds me of when I was in Maine. We did that in Maine with my friend. It was awesome. It was fun. I have pictures of climbing, but you had to climb like up the boulders. You're scaling it. It's not very safe, but it's fun.
And I mean, I'm an overweight, and even then I was an overweight, out of shape, theater geek, and so for me, like I got to the top. It's not hugely hard to climb this thing. And we got to the top, and the top doesn't come out of the tree. The trees are still above you. So we got to the top, and I mean, it's a very nice place. We didn't experience anything strange while we were there, but it's like middle of the day, the sun's out. We're up there just having fun. But it was one of those things where like we read about it and we were like, hey,
Of course.
This place is nearby.
Bring the Ouija board.
This place is nearby. Let's go check it out. And we had there was no registering of like that was private property, but nobody came and shooed us away.
Yeah.
I mean, we were parked right out on the road, you know.
So they're obviously, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's only if you're there, like if you were to park there and go up there at night, or you were very obviously doing like
vandalism
weird
or something
things.
like that.
I'm sure
like Katie's church.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you would get like the local cops called out on you or something. But we were just, and that like a couple of the friends got nervous. They were like, well, what do we, like if somebody shows up, if the cops show up or something, and we were like, we're just having a nature hike. We're just hiking.
Yeah.
And oh, we're sorry. We didn't know
This
we were
was Hexenkopf?
we thought this was public property, so sorry, and we just leave.
Yeah.
Or it could be like us at the cemetery. Oh, no, we're ghost hunting. Look at our cool pictures.
Yeah. I said,
It's you
just make
people.
sure nobody has any substances in case that were to happen. That way we just get to leave.
We're going to reenact all the powwows that happen. So I guess we should probably start off now after with that beautiful like imagery, because it is here. I've never been there, but I saw the pictures. It seems absolutely gorgeous. Because in Pennsylvania, like we have some of the best foliage. Like we've been all over the United States now.
Yep.
I gotta say, there's something amazing about Pennsylvania. We have all 4 seasons, and our trees change to beautiful reds and yellows, and the foliage and the snow is beautiful. Like, so all of our seasons are gorgeous. We may hate some more than others, and they may have their sucky parts. Like end of July here and August, whoo boy, I hate all of that humidity, hate the mosquitoes. But I hear that it's gorgeous there because it has all the foliage and it has all those natural
The
plants
birch
growing.
trees and everything.
Yeah, all of it.
Oh yeah, and when you're up there and you're in the treetops, like you can't see the road. You're completely isolated from the world.
That'd be kind of like be so relaxing. I feel like.
Oh yeah, it was very very pretty. But there's also some odd things, and I can get into that as we move.
Well, there are weird things, which is why we're talking about it. Otherwise, this isn't a nature podcast. Look at this neat hawk.
Good times.
Oh boy. Anyway, so Hexenkopf is famous. The name is very Germanic, which we'll get into in a second.
Hexenkopf.
Oh, very, very German, yeah. But it actually was used by the Lenni Lenape Indians originally. It was a place where they had powwows. So there's a lot of negative energy connected around that because of their powwows. And then when German explorers came here, they saw that as like, bad stuff, bad juju kind of thing. So we know that like they didn't want to use it, but one guy named Johann Peter Seiler was a powwow doctor. So he used it to do like lots of, things to get medicinal herbs and use powwow medicine. Like he kind of followed the superstitions. And of course his name Seiler became Sailor. So his son Peter Sailor kind of continued that. So there's that little bit of a background, but just knowing that Lenni and Lenape are connected is actually really important because they get like, I want to say like really misconstrued by current Pennsylvanians and maybe a lot of America. Technically speaking, Pennsylvania refuses to admit that the Lenni Lenape live here or they ever lived here. Still, like we're the only state that like refuses to recognize them. And one of the reasons why is because we pushed them out, and it's just an embarrassment that we took over so much of their land. And they broke away from the Iroquois because they were part of the big council tribes, and everyone came over here for safety. And Lenni and Lenape are actually the ones who fought a lot of the time with the French in the French and Indian War.
Well, yeah, that's the all kind of related to the Algonquin, groups, and and that's where the powwow, verbiage is derived.
And like when kids are in school, they learn, the Lenni and the Lenape were, all about the turtle. So what's one of their major symbols for Mother Earth? And they made we all have the log cabin kind of look, right? All their different but they also were in Native Americans who, when pushed, because they were very loving and very giving, which is why they were taken advantage of horribly many times with terrible and fake papers. What was that one that was?
Well, even William Penn, the walking purchase.
The walking purchase, yeah. That was a big one. Well, actually, no, that was his son. William Penn did it. His children were the awful ones.
Yeah.
So it was James Logan, I think is his name. But yeah, they hired 3 different people to walk the fastest. They said he was the walking person, so they got more land. But
Yeah.
so they started like, attacking. There were many skirmishes that for some reason don't pop up in the major battles. If you like research this, like the 7 years, American Indian War, but you have major battles happening 1755. You have Braddock not win at Duquesne, and so we have that pushed back over in Pittsburgh area, so that bad stuff happens. You have the massacre of Penn Creek, which is just horrific, and there's later about Hawk Mountain. So Lenny and Lenape were like known for coming in and doing these quick guerrilla style skirmishes, killing everyone on the farmstead, lighting everything on fire, sometimes taking young children, especially girls, in as slaves to work. And if you read like the book I Am Regina, that actually is the story of one girl, Regina, who was stolen during one of those major skirmishes. So you have that negativity of this kind of like war faction tribe connected to Hexenkopf. So like that I think is important, because while they're doing powwows, they also did not like the white man for many obvious reasons. My mother coming from the Cherokee background, and how the Cherokee and the Choctaw were taken advantage of, and the Kawasaba, like it's just, I feel for the Native American plight, especially since most of the Lenape are like in Oklahoma now because they're pushed that far away.
Well, and wasn't it too, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it too that when whichever Penn it was, set up Thomas Penn.
Yeah, I knew it was one of the
set up the walking purchase. The idea was it was however far a man could walk in a day.
1 day.
But they said, but you never told us it had to be just one man, and you also didn't tell us where they had to start from. Yeah. So he actually had them spaced out across the state.
I think what
and
happened
so they
is,
started and would walk that distance in the day to like the next location, and they just had to all start at, when the sun came up. Yeah. And they got to wherever they walked, and he said, "Oh, that's all ours."
For our bicentennial, is that what it was this year? The 250th, whatever.
Yeah.
For our
250.
town, I did a lot of research on my own to just in case I was asked any questions, because they can throw you some loopy questions, and so for that entire thing, he hired 3 guys. But it was because he wasn't sure who'd walk the fastest, and he wanted the most amount of land. So he had 3 different guys. 2 guys could not keep up a steady pace. But the 3rd guy, they had a trail made. So they showed him where to go. And so it was easier to get the land they wanted because they had that trail totally ready for him, mapped out, easy to get through, to traverse. And that's why they ended up getting all of that, because they were shady, horrible people. But wasn't there also a Treaty of Easton to kind of fix a lot of the issues? Like, again, Easton being the county seat. I want to say there was the Treaty of Easton.
That I would have to look it up. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Well, we'll go. It's me. I'm pretty sure I'm right. But anyway, so having that background then, and then bringing in that Dutch folklore to Hexenkopf, I think it's, again, really important to have that background and how the Lenni Lenape kind of connects to Hawk Mountain too. So I want to go in really quickly before you take control and tell your spooky stories, you naughty boy, to the ghost stories of Lehigh Valley once again by Charles J. Adams III and David Seabolt, because they just do such a good job. It's also called Misery Mountain. Is there a reason for that? Like, do you know why that's a secondary name?
Misery Mountain, for all I can remember, is that the only reason it was called that was because of the fact that there had been some deaths attributed.
Oh, it makes sense.
To the location, and then not only that, but because it was known to bring bad luck. That if you went there or you lived in the area around it,
and the mica in the rock, if you saw the glowing rock, okay,
yeah.
That makes sense. So I want to just quote from this text because, again, you're not from Pennsylvania. We're tossing lots of big words at you, because I can say Lenni and Lenape like no problem. We can say Monongahela. We can say Duquesne. Like, we know how to pronounce these words because we're locals and we're used to all the Native American words. But we also have a rich Pennsylvania Dutch history. So Hexenkopf and Seiler and Beitzer and all these names, like, they're easy for us to pronounce because we're used to seeing them. But here's the background then. So we know that, of course, we have all the Dutch come over, and of course the Puritans come over. So it says, many of the most substantial stories of this darker side of the Pennsylvania Dutch were recorded in the dialect, a lyrical corruption of German and English, which is still spoken by a small number of Lehigh Valley residents. Indeed, the origins of some of the deepest of the occult practices can be traced to ancient Germany, where such events as Walpurgisnacht brought the fear of the power of the underworld to the villages and countryside of the Rhine River Valley. On this evening, April 30th, folks would prepare bonfires and other distractions, which would ward off the evil spirits and witches who were said to roam at midnight. And so you have that very old-fashioned belief of, like, Krampus and
Walpurgisnacht.
yes, all those fun stuff.
That's actually in Fantasia when the demon is at the top of the mountain. That's the mountain in Germany where that was believed that the evil forces spewed out of on Walpurgisnacht.
Boogie, 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 boogie. Yeah. So you bring that, mix it with all the Lenape
Was it Ball
stuff.
Mountain? Ball Mountain.
Yeah. Is it Bald or Bald? I think it's BALD, Bald Mountain.
I thought it was Ball.
The music, right?
PJ.
Night on Bald Mountain.
Is it Bald?
I've played it many times in band at this local school. But again, you add that very dark, Germanic Dutch history with the Lenape traditions of what they were doing, and then what was currently, am I right?
Bald.
Oh, okay.
That's right. Once again, 2002 for that book. It definitely was a treaty of Easton. Don't even look it up. Mama's got a sharp mind. When I come on my podcast, I don't know much, but I know that now. But yeah, so I just think it's interesting that we have this belief in this place that is so beautiful because you bring in these dark traditions, and you got a guy who is from that area coming over. Well, I'm gonna make powwow medicine now. I'm gonna make money off of this. But the Witch's Hill, or Hexenkopf, because it's translated right, so it means witch's head.
Yeah, Witch's Head. Yep.
It is shiny. Why? Take us away. Paint us a picture with your words.
Oh, yeah. It's got mica deposits all over the mountain, so that when the idea being that part is a bit of a what's the word? A bit of a humbug. That when the moon hits it on a bright night in fall when the leaves are off the trees, it looks like it shimmers.
It's not a pizza pie and amore.
The hill looks like it shimmers or glows.
But wouldn't that be naturally beautiful? I can see why you would think, oh my gosh, ghosts. But that would be so cool to see.
That would be really neat.
Because now it's been washed away. Years of erosion have gotten rid of most of the mica deposits, right?
I have no idea. That's something that
Road trip.
Road trip.
Yeah, you would have to ask some locals or observe it at night on a bright night. I don't know.
But yeah, so in the book it says, scattered deposits of mica on the rocks in Hexenkopf make it glare in the moonlight. As Boyd said, local people looked upon Hexenkopf as they would have looked upon the throne of the evil one himself. So instead of seeing a beautiful, miraculous event with mica and shimmering moonlight, they went, ha, the devil! I love that. And so, of course, all of our folklore is then created. Witches are up there, burn them, hang all the witches. Oh, the Indians were there, so therefore there's bloodshed and dead people.
Yeah, they
didn't understand the Native Americans.
Yeah, they had a belief that the place just drew negativity. That they believed witches held Sabbaths up there, and that's actually so when
Was it a Black Sabbath? It could be.
Sharon, Sharon, I can't climb the hill. So
I'm just seeing that now in my head.
It was Micah. I'm the Prince of Bloody Darkness.
Jack Osborne's there with his EVP device trying to get voices.
Shut up, Dad.
But when we went up onto Hexenkopf, one of the things that we noticed right away while we were kind of scaling around, trying to feel spooky,
boogie.
was there are little fireplaces there, little chimneys, like natural chimneys, basically, where people had built fires, and you can see where the burnt, pieces of wood and shrubbery and kindling, and then you can see where it basically, it's sort of like a kind of you see it in some of the survivalist shows and stuff, where you find a rock formation that's kind of got a bit of an indent, and then a ceiling, the back part of it that slopes kind of up towards you, and back in that little alcove is where you make your fire, and then the smoke will travel up that natural slope and up. And so we actually found a couple of those where people had been burning things up there on the rock.
Oh, so it does have stuff going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, whether that's people going up there and camping out and trying to have, fun on the haunted mountain, or if that was people thinking that
Maybe they
were
were roasting marshmallows, Kyle.
I
Okay.
didn't see any marshmallows.
Well, they ate them.
We did wonder if some of the things that we were seeing in the fires could have been bone, but we weren't like
I
inspecting
would
it
not touch
too
it.
deeply. And so yeah, there had been obvious fires that had been set, and as some kind of, whether it be a camp or whether you want to suspect that somebody was possibly trying to do something more ritualistic, there were fires up there.
Well, that's interesting because in the other article that I had printed out, actually you have it, and the PA normal or paranormal and true crime blog. It's fantastic. The person who's in charge, I think her name's Annalise. You can find her like at Twitter and stuff too. But I want to say down this first page, she mentions at some point that there's like I want to say that people believe that this place was like haunted even into the 1940s. Isn't that in that paragraph somewhere, 1940s? So like
because a woman rode her horse out there one night because she was convinced that witches were taking her horses to ride them in the middle of the night because her horses would be like covered in sweat in the morning.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So she took her horse out one night and she came back like mentally unstable, and she's not the only one who has lived in that area and had like severe mental instability.
And so like, well, I want to believe that Hexenkopf is like fine and neat and safe, but that 1940s, like that's modern day.
Well, I mean, there's people even that have, I think it's in the book, have had experiences even more recently than that. Let me see.
That's a pretty big section too. Yeah, the book is very it's exhaustive, I would say. It really goes into a lot of detail.
Is it?
Yeah, here we go. This is Robert Sipe of New Jersey. Well, this is the Knapps, where they quote Jane Knapp. "I won't venture to the rocks at night, and positively not on Halloween. She lives on Hexenkopf Road, and her reason for avoiding any confrontation with the powers that may or may not be on the mountain stem from some very personal experiences. On Halloween many years ago," she said, "Robert Sipe of New Jersey asked his sister Dorothy Knapp if he could host a party at her home. And so they had the party. The party took place. At midnight, as planned, a few people decided to go up to the rock to be spooky. And now, of course, these were not the people who lived there because they wouldn't have done that. So they went up, and several weeks later, she says, many mishaps and tragedies followed. There was a thunder and lightning storm, and it knocked a tree down that missed a neighbor's home by a couple of feet. That same neighbor who lived in the back of the house where the party was held was working at a department store, and one day when she was loading things on a shelf, things fell down and hit her, and she had to go to the hospital. Another one of the adventurers later suffered a hernia and needed treatment. So there is some level of
that connection.
Well, and there is one thing where you start to attribute bad things to
that coincidence from yourself.
The place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's people even to today that believe you shouldn't go up there. You should just leave it alone.
They even say people who live like on or near the property, like buildings frequently catch on fire. You can't like reliably cultivate crops there.
Yeah, they have an odd number of lightning strikes.
That's crazy.
Things like that. But back to what you were saying about the woman who believed that her horses were being ridden by witches at night. That is to kind of tie back into the powwow medicine aspect of it. So the kind of the common term that was thrown around, is powwow medicine,
Yeah.
Powwow practitioners, powwow doctors, even some of them would be called. And the idea being that they would come, and if you had an illness in the family that, maybe a regular medicine, or if you didn't trust regular medicine, couldn't handle, you would call the powwow man. In some places, I think especially down south, they have a similar thing where they call them hand tremblers, where they literally come and they
find the problem in your body.
and they tremble their hand over top and they pull the illness out.
Demon be gone.
Yeah, powwow practitioners were basically supposed to be like the same thing. Or if you thought that there was a possibility that you had a run of bad luck and you thought that maybe your property, your farm, whatever, was cursed. And back then they thought, who curses people? Witches.
Yep.
And that's one of the signs of a witch. There's like certain signs that they would look for.
Listen to the Bell Witch
The
hauntings.
butter that doesn't churn, the flame that burns blue, horses that sweat in the morning. These are all kind of the cow that all of a sudden doesn't give milk.
Give milk, it dries up.
So these would all be classic signs for them that they may have been cursed, or there may
Not
be
that the
witchcraft
cow is
afoot.
stressed or not getting enough food. No, absolutely not.
And so they would call the powwow man to come and lift the curse. And one of the things I think I mentioned talking about the crone of the Catskills, that when I heard the description, and then I looked up the picture of it, and when I saw it, the first thing I thought of was that to me seemed like a powwow binding, because one of the classic things that they would use everyday items. Well, first of all, it was very much based in Christianity. So they would say prayers. They would bring a Bible every. Now today they're still around, some of them, and they it's what's the word, brauche.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, brauche or braucherei.
Yeah.
And it's to need or to make use of, and so they would use these like common items from around that people would have around their house, or common herbs like might be found up at Hexenkopf. And they would come and they would try to, in some way, trap or bind the illness or the spirit. And one of the classic things they would use is iron nails, bits of twine, things like that. And so when I heard the description of the crone of the Catskills, I thought
clothing line.
I thought that sounds to me like somebody bound an evil spirit to that doll, and then put it, and like with Hexenkopf, tried to take it out someplace and drop it off where they thought no one will bother this.
Little did they know.
So was it this place or the next thing that we're going to talk about where they literally like buried and burned bodies in caverns?
So that's going to
nearby.
be, that's not
Is that
Hexenkopf. Yeah.
Okay.
So Hexenkopf is the place where we're having powwows. It's
Yeah.
beautiful boulders. It's a lovely location, but I mean, it does seem like it's like negatively enchanted because people are still afraid of it. And I find like no one's really, well, if you believe urban legends, you're afraid of Katie's church. But if you're from the area, it's fake. Like, don't even go up there, like, whatever. Kyle's never been there, which means it has to be fake because Kyle goes to all the bad places. Speaking of, do you want to go to Hillman? No, anyway.
Yes. I was going to bring that up later.
Come to
Hillview
Hillman
Manor.
with us. There
We're
we
going.
go.
Carrie, we need that interview.
Carrie, if you're listening, which you're not. Anyway, so there were lots of ghost stories, though, that were in the different articles. Like, so what ghost stories did you hear about Hexenkopf before I, like, numerize some?
Well, the biggest thing that I always heard about Hexenkopf was the lights. You would see mysterious lights on the hill, more than just, like, the glow of the hill itself. That there were these, like numerous like colors, almost like the way people describe like UFO orbs.
Yeah.
That they would appear and disappear and zip around up on the mountain. And then the biggest thing was that supposedly, because part of how it supposedly got its name was that a witch was chased up onto the rock. They were chasing her to bring her to justice for, cursing and doing witchcraft and all this, and that she fell or was pushed, either one you hear, and that when she fell, her head hit one of the stones, and that she died, and that stone is oddly enough the one that looks like the witch's head, and that you might see her up on the mountain. Now, I did, just perusing through some of the stories, getting ready for, I do remember reading about the headless hunter.
Yeah, we have our own headless horseman, guys, not just Sleepy Hollow.
But I had never ever heard anybody talk about seeing
this
that,
book is
or a white fox or any of
that
kind
one
of
I'm
stuff.
confused about. But the PA normal or the paranormal and true crime blog mentions all of these too. But I'm going to go back to the book because me being an English teacher. So, first off, there is a spirit of an old man. And if you find him or the ghost of his, because he saw a ghost of his daughter, you'll find his treasure. It's hidden somewhere up there. He'll also just scream at you with a loud boom.
That's like classic, like
of course.
Oh yeah,
classic folktale.
I love that.
There's also a ghost that has a pig. It's a
The
pig,
peg
leg,
leg,
man.
yeah.
I'm sorry. That's so cool.
You can hear him tapping.
Yeah, that's so cool. They've named him Farmer Brown. He's easily recognizable by the eerie tapping of his wooden leg on the rocks. So Farmer Brown, which that's not too far off there because Braun is a pretty well-known Dutch-German name. So Brown actually has come from Braun.
Yep.
There's also ghosts of farmers who in life engaged in volatile disputes over property lines. They're now in Hexenkopf. Their feud continued, so you'll see terrible bolts of fire and putrid stenches. There's a headless hunter and his companion, an equally decapitated dog. So it's a headless hunter and his headless dog. And
without the head, I don't know
fox.
how you're sure it's a dog. That's my only kind of...
And that's why this elusive white fox ghost has befuddled marksmen on the hill for decades. Because they have no heads. Anyway, so there are lots of different ghosts.
Yeah. I mean, you're almost in any place where you have a location that people think you should. It's one of the things that actually kind of leads me to believe that even though, like when I went there, it's during the day, we had a nice, pleasant time. I have a feeling that place may be different at night.
That's like Jack's story.
Takes a whole different energy.
Work.
And I have a feeling that it does draw some odd things. Because usually stories like those, which I think are probably totally BS,
exaggerated,
they crop up because that's like local fairy tales to warn like people don't go up there at night.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to like what you find when you go up there. So I'm going to tell you there's a headless hunter and his dog.
But actually, it's a headless Cerberus.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that there's like a weird old man, and I'm going to tell you that there's all this scary stuff up there, because they're just trying to keep you away.
Well, there's always a germ of truth in a lot of these stories. We just tend to add that gossipy tagline to it. We make the story a little bit scarier each time.
Yeah, and the story always, changes.
Yep.
It always alters from one teller to the next.
But what's interesting is, a lot of these places, like Katie's Church, for example, have not withstood the test of time. While kids may go up there and vandalize nowadays, everyone knows that it's not haunted. Everyone knows that. But this one has stood the test of time. People are still telling these modern stories of bad things that are happening. People are still afraid to go up there. I find that to be quite compelling, that this might be a not so great place to go.
Yeah. And I will say, to go along with, like, we found these little kind of fireplace areas while we were up there poking around. When we got up, so when you approach from the side where Hexenkopf Road is, and you go up, it's not till because we went all the way to the top. We were at the very top stone, rock, where you're in the treetops. But a couple of my friends went down the other side. They wanted to see, what was down that way. Mm-hmm. So they started climbing down, and next thing I know, they're kind of like calling us. So we kind of worked our way down around so we could look down from where we were to see where they were. And on the other side of the hill, there is this strange, large plateau area that is in a very rough triangular shape. And I mean, it looks like it would hold multiple people. Two of my friends were standing on it, and we commented on the day, like right away when we saw it. We were like, and then after seeing the little fireplaces, we were like, this is the perfect place to do rituals.
Oh yeah.
Because like you're up there, you're literally on top of the rocks. You're way up where no one is going to see you. Especially on a summer night when the trees are full of leaves.
No one's going to see the fire.
If they're not seeing the fires at night, if they're not sending cops up there to like shoot people off the rock when there's fires going, they're not going to see you if you're on the other side of the rock on this large plateau doing who knows what.
I'm not
It
sure if
looked
it
like a
was-
ritual space.
if it was one of the articles, because I did so much research, I just pulled the major things for tonight. But there was discussion about the powwow medicine, to go back to the whole doctoring thing. And I put doctors in air quotes because they weren't doctors back then. Modern medicine to begin to like 1900s. But when it came to this, they would take people to the mountain because they could get that like supernatural wave of energy to help the people. So if they ended up dying by these powwow doctors, oh, it was the witches, it was the bad juju of the hill, not this crap doctor who isn't a doctor and he's just some kind of crazy cuckoo, right? So you have these like negative deaths, and as we discussed in our last podcast, places where there was a traumatic death, like you're going to have a haunting there because it was an unjust death, whether it's a hanging or dying by the hands of some crazy powwow doctor. So I feel like a lot of that energy is going to be there. And they mentioned the ritualistic area, so you probably were in the place where one of those stories was discussing.
Yeah, and if you believe in any way, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that powwow medicine or brauche or whatever you want to call it, that's necessarily.
Isn't there one called bruja too? Is it?
Well, that's the funny part, is that it's very close. That it's odd that they would choose the word brauche, which just means to need or to make use of, when it's very close to bruja, which is Spanish for witch.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're in a weird way, whether that's subconsciously or whatever, they're associating it
With witchcraft.
with that concept. That basically it's sort of like you're calling in a good witch to alleviate a bad witch. To alleviate the effects of a bad witch. And so I'm not saying that I believe in any of that, but what I'm saying is let's say hypothetically any of it is true, if any of the people that were practicing this stuff at the time, I mean, there were a lot of people that put a lot of stock in folk medicine. If any of what was going on, and we know that some of that stuff actually, like, the kind of wise old woman of the village,
The crone.
sometimes she knew what the heck she was doing,
Yeah.
more so than other people.
We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
So if you put any stock in that, the stories would be that they were literally, pulling these spirits and pulling these curses and things off of these people, momentarily trapping them in some way, and then going up there and releasing that. Oh, I bumped my mic. Releasing that stuff into the rocks.
What she really did is she put a Band-Aid on your boo-boo.
And so that's the thing. So then that's where you get that idea that whole place, all the stones are imbued
And it's
with
going to have that, the energy again, that you're imbuing it with that power.
And even if it's not real, like the fact that you have somebody, let's say you have somebody that truly believes in it, the power of their intention can be possibly enough to simply imbue the place with negativity.
Well, kind of like that. I discussed the power of positive thinking, right? People who have an inflated ego of themselves, they tend to do better because there is that lack of disbelief in themselves. So if you flip-flop that, you can have a power of negative thinking, where anything that happens here is going to be bad. And if you believe that, all the goodness is going to wash away. You're going to only see the negative. So you're imbuing that negativity into that area. And whether that energy is going to actually manifest itself or not, that who's to say. But again, if it's coincidence, if everyone thing that happened, that one lady, the naps, if all that stuff happened just coincidentally, because you always hear people say all bad things come in sets of 3, it's actually usually true because you're counting. Okay, it's been 3 things, we're done. No more bad things, right?
Yeah, and if everybody in the area believes that that's the place where the bad spirits get left, at some point it's possible that becomes a manifestation of where the bad spirits go.
Yeah.
And so then you go there and bad things happen.
So my question then is, before we finish this section and go into the next part, do you think Hexenkopf is haunted? Yes or no, and why?
I would say that it is not necessarily on the numerous stories of headless hunters
or the white box.
But I think that having been there, and even though it was like a wonderfully positive experience, I think the positivity I have a sense that that positivity was because that was the positivity we brought to it. I think that there are many people that go up to that place for non-positive reasons.
Yeah.
And I think that that alone is going to cause. I'm a believer in energy. I believe in that stuff, and I think that that's going to cause enough of an energy to build up that things are going to happen. I would put more stock in the strange lights and things like that. Like the people who say like that they saw strange lights on the mountain, that falls more into the category for me of like, I know what I saw.
I was there.
It's one thing if like the guy comes into the local tavern and says, I saw a headless hunter and his headless dog. And you're like, shut up, Larry.
I saw Farmer Brown.
But if somebody comes in like, you're not going to believe the crazy crap I saw up on the mountain. There were all these lights, they were going everywhere, and they were multicolored and this, that, and the other thing. Like, for somebody, especially of that time period, like let's say we're going back a little ways, to the time period when powwow medicine and things like that might have been going on.
And when the mica was still fresh and not eroded.
That's something that I feel like is a little more outside of like what somebody then would make up. Like a headless hunter is more along the lines of what somebody of that time period would just make up.
Added on, yep.
But to say strange multicolored lights flashing and zipping around and all that kind of stuff, that seems to me something almost of that's a more modern kind of description of
I would love
phenomena.
to know, like, I wish you could trace back, oral tradition stories, because you can't. Like, they're oral tradition for a reason. Because I'd love to know when the headless horseman and his headless dog showed up. Because you have Washington Irving writing as soon as America becomes America. He is our first actual writer. And so Legend of Sleepy Hollow was just a Germanic story that he put in America. He made his money by plagiarizing everything he wrote.
Tarrytown thinks it's so hot for having a headless horseman. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Easton's got a headless hunter.
We got one in Sleepy Hollow, and we got one on Hexenkopf.
I know it. Hexenkopf is going to be just as famous. I'm going to write a book.
But like if we're talking like the Lenni Lenape doing all their terrible stuff, the French Indian War we're talking like that was the 1750s through the 60s. Then you have us fighting for America. And then by the 1790s, we finally are an established country, which means that Washington Irving is not long after. So I want to know what, like, because he became a writer. He was our first writer, hence the name Washington. He was our first American, and he was writing. Did the Headless Horseman show up after his major story? Because this is a Dutch-speaking area, and he's writing about Dutch Germanic stories. Or does it predate because they would have known the story of the Headless Horseman from their Germanic stories? Because I feel that story is fake. I feel the guy with the peg leg is fake. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But I think that's fake. Anyway, PJ, before I say my thoughts, what do you think?
I agree with Kyle that I do think it's haunted, but not because of the weird ghost stories and things like that. But I believe in it because of our personal experiences and what rituals in general can do to a property.
You just took my entire thing, but you continue. You're doing great.
So I thought of this all on my own.
I love when our minds connect, yeah. You just took it out of my brain now.
Can I change mine to I think it's ritual?
I'll take
get out of
here. It's like last week. No, PJ claimed it. It's PJ's. And Jack's like, yeah, it's PJ's.
It's pronounced a Ouija.
Get out of here.
He did it again.
He did the thing. He's doing the bit. Anyway, so you're saying ritual.
And so we know how, like, the tone of an area can shift on a dime, too. Doesn't even have to be time of day, but I'm sure nighttime definitely helped because that's when most rituals happen.
Witching hour, yeah.
So it would make, like, all that just adds up in my head to me. Why?
So if I were to add on to your wonderfully original idea that came out of my brain too, again, we're connected because we lived in this shared experience. I feel like we connect. I think it's haunted too. And I know that I've been making fun of it the entire time, but I actually think it's haunted and I would never go there because...
I want to go there.
Of course you do. Take Kyle.
Okay.
Take Simon too. Like, just go for a walk. But as you said, like the ritual aspect, the triangle that you mentioned, like that was in my research. So it's interesting to hear your comment because again, this has all happened organically right now, you know. But having that there means that they were summoning some bad stuff. And witches happen in the middle of the night. And they're seeing lights middle of the night. Sure, Micah can shine because of moonlight. But we have fog roll in out of friggin' nowhere because it's Pennsylvania. We had a heavy, dense fog advisory this morning. And I'm driving, nothing. 2 feet later, boom, wall of fog. That's just how it is. So if they're seeing things lighting up and there is no moon in the sky, something's happening. And those rituals would have happened in the middle of the night during the witching hour.
What if?
Oh, no.
Colored lights in the sky. Aliens. They built Hexenkopf.
We had the original Skinwalker Ranch. We deserve to be on
We've had
History
it the
Channel.
whole time.
Yeah, they come down, they say, "Hello, German man. We would like you to build a mountain for us as our recharging station."
This Micah is lovely. Oh,
One of the aliens had a peg leg.
that's where it came
That's
from.
where it comes from.
And they got mad at somebody, so they cut off the person's head and his dog's head too. It's a witch thing. I'll get you in your little. Somebody was watching Wizard of Oz in the 1940s, 50s, whenever it came out, and then they went, you know what? Headless horseman and headless dog. Wizard of Oz. Bad witches. I figured it out. I'll get you and your little dog too.
Not sure how you got to Wizard of Oz with all this, but
You've been inside my brain. Last week was a good example. I'm thinking of Fog and Molly's right now.
that train of thought was a lot easier to follow.
Nope. Just enjoy the ride. That's how fast my brain works. You should live in my brain for a day.
No, thank you.
I truly understand the plight of my gifted kids because I am one. This is a true gifted brain. It's a mess. It's a scribble all over a page, but it's beautiful. Anyway, so we all agree that it's most likely haunted.
Yeah, and I think you know, I almost kind of wish that there was more history from that area.
Yeah.
You know, the history of Easton proper is well documented, but this is like well on the outskirts.
Well, the problem with the rural areas was they were
Yeah.
getting killed off by Native Americans. You know,
Yeah.
they'd get some land and then they would get in a skirmish and they'd die.
And
they didn't read. They didn't write.
I have a feeling this probably falls more in the line. Just the vibe I get. I have no basis for this at all. I have a feeling something really bad, happened there.
He's doing the thing.
Whether I think.
No, I was like, it's bad. This is really bad. That's what I was thinking of.
I have a feeling that at some point in the very early history of the area, whether it was a
skirmish,
a skirmish, a Native American massacre, whether it was an actual woman, you know, who's suspected of witchcraft being accidentally or purposefully killed, something bad happened on those rocks, and it got tagged by the locals as that's the place where bad stuff happens.
Yeah.
and then
That's the
people
place.
went, well, I'm going to go there and do bad stuff.
That's the place where the bad things live. And every kind of society, culture, environment, region has that place. That's the place where the bad things live.
Even Lion King has that place.
Yeah.
The elephant graveyard.
Yeah. And so
Is that a better brain process? Is that a good connection?
and so
We
once
don't go there.
once it got that label, then it's almost like you have a bit of a battery.
And when you have a beacon too for those who want to do bad stuff on the mountain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Where is if you're into ritual magic or dark witchcraft, or if you're into that stuff, if you believe so deeply in that stuff and you wanna really drum up some bad juju, where are you gonna go? You're gonna go to the place where the bad things live.
Elephant
Place with the
graveyard.
reputation.
Yeah.
Not elephant graveyard. Never mind. Darn.
Yeah, it's just like the what is it where they're always having in a lot of these places, not just in England but here, where you have like the old abandoned insane asylums, and you have the old abandoned jails.
Yep.
And things, and they're always having trouble with people breaking in and and they find ritual items, they find pentagrams. You know, I'm the type of person, I don't believe in that stuff. I think that's just a bunch of goth kids, you know, screwing
Trying
around.
to be cool.
Yeah, they're screwing around. They're hoping to change their lives in some major way. I think the people who, if there's anybody out there that really has something that can do that stuff, they don't get together in groups and go do it in public places. You know, they own homes and they have rooms in their homes.
Productive members of society.
Well, that's the thing. If the stuff, if they're doing it and it works, they have their own place to do it. They don't need to go to some abandoned joint on a weekend and burn some, you know, black candles, you know, and all this kind of stuff.
Wait, I know that movie. Oh.
But so they're always trying to shoo those kids out of those places. And so that's that idea, is that people want to do dark things, and so they think we need to go to the dark place and do it there because that's where it's going to be the most powerful. And then
you summon some demons and your house gets haunted. I mean, Hexenkopf gets haunted. Sorry, you're right, connection.
Yeah, I mean, I do love the idea of like a bunch of goth kids breaking into an old abandoned insane asylum and like accidentally it working. I love that idea. I love them accidentally summoning. I instantly
regret this.
I love them accidentally summoning, like, you know, some
a horror movie.
Some prince of legions from the 7th level of hell. You know, like
no. I wanted the dog. Oh man.
Yeah, you know, Black Phillip.
No.
Just shows up. You know, and it's like all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my god, it worked!"
And then one goes, "But I do want to live deliciously."
You know, and it's that realization of, oh God, it worked.
There's so much power. All right. There we go. Let's move into creepy thoughts with Kyle.
I think one of the people. I thought it would be a good idea if we turned Shannon into the girl. I thought it would be a good idea if we. I thought it would be a good idea. I thought it would be a good idea into the girl from Ringu. This is bad. This is really bad. It's
I love it. It never gets old. That is, you know, PJ's made all of our intro music and that kind of stuff, but that will go down as the best thing he ever made because he took only 4 clips from you and made that. He seemed like you talk a lot, but it really was just 4 clips, right? 4?
4.
Yeah, that's it.
So first I want to say, before I go into my actual thought on the last episode, one of my coworkers at the office. He's
listens to the podcast.
He's a listener.
Yay!
and he's like, yeah, they did you dirty.
Please.
And we got the idiot to come on again.
He comes back for more.
But he thought it was amazing.
Of course he did. Everyone, he's just Lorna, like, Ray's like, when did you know that you had something to work with? And I'm like, it just came to us.
So my creepy thought that was inspired by the last episode about Katie's church is basically like I know that you guys had some discussion of like, can like cemeteries and churches and things be haunted? And my opinion is that of course they can. Any place, I believe that because I do believe that I don't believe hauntings are as prevalent as people want them to believe, or Hollywood, or you know, the Warrens. But
it makes for good movies.
You know, any of them.
Warrens.
I don't, or Hans Holzer. I don't think that it's as prevalent as people want you to believe, but I think that they are real. I've heard enough stories from personal stories and have experienced enough small things on my own to believe that they happen. And I think that any place where you've had high emotion or intense emotion, happy or sad, can be a place where a haunting can linger, you know, and whether that's residual or intelligent. So a cemetery where, you know, somebody was bereaved, you know, that may have been the only time in that person's life that anyone expressed.
I really love this guy.
Them.
Really, you did? That's
yeah,
awesome.
and that person's spirit may want so badly to hang on to that feeling of people missing them and wishing that they were there, and so they stay. They linger. You know, I like that. I love that word. Mm-hmm. They linger. You know,
there's a song in Girl Scouts. I want to linger a little longer.
Oh, it's the Marcel the Shell song.
Still so surprised that Marcel's a boy. I'm gonna be honest. That threw me for a loop in the movie. It's a boy.
And then if ancient abbeys and cathedrals and things, if they can be haunted, you know, over in England especially by monks and things like that, well then of course like a standard church could be haunted by either a minister or maybe even a bride. Maybe the happiest day of her life before she was brutally murdered by her husband
and their stories
was in that church. And that's where she wants to spend the rest of her eternity because that was her happiest day.
Yep. Caretakers taking care of graveyards, nuns still doing their work, like their charitable work, because that gave them meaning to their lives.
Yeah. So any place where you have intense emotion, deep connection, I think those places can be haunted.
I'm going to get real for a second because I'm always joking around. But I actually made a New Year's commitment to myself to actually be more open, which is really uncomfortable for me. Because, you know, as PJ, like, I close myself off.
It's uncomfortable for me, too.
If I get upset...
Yeah, actually, could you be less open right now?
Put your clothes back on, for one thing.
It's a hot down here. Anyway... No, that's the D&D podcast. It's not ours.
Avert gaze.
I'm a married man. I'm a married spud.
I'm sorry, Kyle. I didn't mean this to happen. I told her to just put something on.
Dude.
You've done such a good job for the past hour pretending that she's...
He was just doing the whole thing where you pretend that your audience has their clothes off.
Oh, he didn't even know.
I thought it was just me. I didn't realize until right now.
Is everyone seeing this? No, so, like when I get upset, I don't talk. I go and I'll cry about it in the bathtub or whatever, and then I'll come out and I'm done. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I've always been like a sponge. Like, I suck it in and then it's gone. Like, that's just how it goes. But now that it's been almost 20 years since my cousin Jenny was horrifically murdered, I feel like I can talk about it more and I can help people through that kind of grieving process, especially with my father having passed away too. I feel like there's been a lot, and my uncle after my cousin, like I feel like there's been a lot of pain in my family, but you know, we've always overcome and we've been positive. And so something that you were talking about earlier when you had mentioned your creepy thought to us before we started the podcast and said it again, I really do feel that like when Jenny was murdered, there was a lot of intense emotion because this beautiful 16-year-old girl was horrifically murdered in every way you can imagine by her next door neighbors, you know. So when we can finally have the funeral, because of course her body was kept for obvious reasons, like for the investigation,
examinations.
It was hard, you know, and everyone was just kind of getting through all that. All of her friends came, of course, the family came, us. And so we get to the graveside, you know, where we're in the cemetery, and it just feels so hard to be there. And it feels like you don't want to say goodbye, because how do you say goodbye to your best friend? Like, I just didn't know how to do that. So as we're there, my grandmother had bought this beautiful graveside bouquet for her because Jenny's favorite color was purple. And so she called the florist and said, I want every purple rose you have, and I want a beautiful, you know, arrangement done for her casket. And because everyone knew the story, and my gram had lived in Randolph, New Jersey for a long time, like, don't worry, Elaine, we'll take it. We'll give you a discount. We'll send it. Don't you worry. And I think she ended up getting it for free from that flower shop because, again, local community. But there was one beautiful light pale purple rose that was right in the middle of this humongous bouquet. And it drew your eye. Like, it was just this fantastic honking huge thing. And as the service was progressing, you know, this monarch butterfly flew down and landed on that rose, and it stayed the entire service, even when the bagpipers came out. She got bagpipes for her because of what had happened, and her friends from school released 16 balloons into the sky for every year of her life. As the bagpipes were going on and the balloons are flying up, the butterfly left that rose and followed the balloons up into the sky, and you never saw any of it ever again. And so it was amazing we all witnessed this because we're like, where to go, And so now, like, when we went to visit her grave many times, afterward, and my Uncle David did too. My Aunt Lori still does, of course, it's their daughter. But there's never been a negative feeling around her gravesite. It's almost like everyone needed that. And so she didn't linger behind. She was able to say goodbye because she had that moment where everyone recognized her because she was bullied in school. She was belittled. And the reason she was murdered was because the younger brother hated her and he was a bully to her. Like, he was horrible to her. So, I think for her, it was just vindicating, but it was also positive to hear how much everyone loved her and appreciated her. And so she was that butterfly and she flew off to heaven. Like, that was the general consensus. So I feel like you can go to her grave and you'll only feel positive energy there now. So that's just me getting real. There you go. I opened up a little bit. That's my happy thought with Shanna.
Should I make an intro for you?
No, it was one and done.
Okay.
New Year's resolution has already been defeated. I'm closing off again. It's gone.
Okay.
You got.
If you did make one, it would have to end with, it's pronounced Ouija.
No, it's going to be like, I researched that. It's correct. Of course I'm right. Of course
I'm an English teacher.
I did the research. Thank you. Something along those lines. I can make my own. Like, I could do myself dirty.
It's pronounced squeegee.
Squeegee.
We're going to get out the squeegee and talk to some ghosts.
We're going to squeegee the ghosts away. That's what we're going to do. It's pronounced Lenny Lenape and Iroquois. And Hi. I'll be here all day. And night.
Day's over, so...
I live here. For the second part of this, we are going to talk about the ghosts of Hawk Mountain because there's a really interesting connection. They're not located close together. Like, the Hawk Mountain is not beside Hexenkopf. But what I like are there's multiple connections between who was there, who settled near them, and what happened on them. So, like, you have that kind of eerie place where the negative energy is. I like that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens to be in the ghost stories of Lehigh Valley as well. So I am going to kind of like mention some stuff out of the book. But then if you really want a good story and you want to learn more about the Dutch Pennsylvanian, background, because we do have lots of Dutch people here, including the Amish. Like, so we have quite the eclectic grouping of Germanic speakers in Pennsylvania. But the hagenbuck.org website, it's their own personal family history and all their genealogy. And so they do, the packet that I have here is just one story of things that have happened. But Hawk Mountain, do you know anything about Hawk Mountain?
Vaguely. I've never been.
I actually want to go here.
I know that Hawk Mountain, I think that's a place that I remember I had a friend of mine in school that was like a Boy Scout, and he eventually became an Eagle Scout. And I think that was like Hawk Mountain was one of the places that they used to go a lot.
I believe it.
On their Boy Scout
It's gorgeous.
adventure trips.
Yep. Well, because it's between like Berks County and Schuylkill counties, so like it's kind of like it's the Lehigh Valley, so it's it's close to all these places, but it's there. And if you've heard of Blue Mountain School District, that's where it is. It's part of the Blue Mountains. So the book then from Adams III and Siebold, they say, although the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, a premier nature center and world-renowned refuge for birds of prey, straddles Berks and Schuylkill counties, it is situated just over the Lehigh County line. And indeed, the impact of the ghostly tales which emanate from its wooded depths stretches well beyond its boundaries. While Hawk Mountain and the valleys which spread before it is certainly a showplace of natural splendor, it is also abundant in wild and chilling stories of the supernatural. It is, quite simply, one of the most haunted areas in the United States of America, and that is no idle boast. So I thought that was really cool. Like, it is one of the most haunted places in America for a very obvious reason. There's two obvious reasons. One is a direct connection to the Lenny Lenape, which is why I chose this, which is what you mentioned earlier, because you know a little bit about Hawk Mountain. But also, what happened by Hawk Mountain, Kyle? Do you remember the tavern story?
Do you remember?
I don't remember all the details, but I remember vaguely that there were murders. There was a guy who owned a tavern, and he enjoyed murdering travelers and possibly putting them in the food.
Not just any food. German sausages. So,
enjoyed the bratwurst.
Yes, it's to be your last. So anyway, So going back to the book again, to the Lenni Lenape Indians, it harbored a certain sanctity. Nudging higher than the hills around it, it was close to their gods. Therefore, it is the site of ceremonies and rituals. Archaeological evidence has been found to verify this, and the deep attachment the Indians had to the mountain may well have been the spiritual spark which ignited the almost demonic flames which cast their frightening glow on all who seek the Hawk Mountain, which is somewhere beyond the realm of the known. And so what you had mentioned is the burnings and
Yeah, that there would be burials and ceremonial burnings of bodies in like caverns, around the mountain.
Yeah, because our area is very cavernous. We are like the coal region of America, so there's lots of caves and lots of those natural like inlets and mountains. So they would take some of their war chieftains and some of the major people and they would burn them in there. And that it became like a ritualistic place to like bury their dead. And so on some nights, if the wind moves correctly, you can hear the howling of voices. Woo! There.
Ka! Ka!
No, not the raven right now. A little bit later.
Ducky! Whippoorwill!
Wee-oo. Anyway. So. Beautiful hawk. Where's the owl?
Who?
Much better. There we go. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Hey.
So anyway, there is discussion that you might hear.
Hey, boo-boo.
Oh, that's a bear.
They
Bear
burn.
scare.
Look out for the bears.
We get a bear scare every time.
They burn a guy in that cave.
Oh dear. So the idea is that you might hear that sound. You might hear the fires crackling too. So the Lenni Lenape do have, again, that connection from the very beginning, like Hexenkopf. It was a place used for rituals because mountains have always been mysterious and a part of their religion to get closer to their gods.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
I was gonna say it makes sense. Like famously, most mountains, the larger mountains, especially if it's like a solitary mountain, have some kind of legendary thing attributed to them because of the fact that the idea being whether you believe that your god lived underneath them, or whether you believe that
on a turtle,
or whether you believe that your god could be telephoned from the top of them. They would. It's classic.
Yeah, and the reason why for them is, in their culture, so the Iroquois especially, but it became part of the storyline for many of these tribes, there was a belief that there is a sky world. And, they're digging by the tree of knowledge and the wife falls through. And so she falls down to earth and it's all water then. And she would have drowned if it hadn't been for some animals who broke her fall. And then they put her on the back of a turtle, a sea turtle who's swimming around. And a muskrat goes down to the bottom of the ocean and gets dirt for her to turn that into a world. So then you can build up the mountain to get closer to your sky god. So for them, it really is just like the ladder, stepping ladder to get back up there.
And it's turtles all the way down.
All the way down. So, boy, oh boy. So that's why the Lenni Lenape actually have their effigies usually are turtles, which is kind of cool. So anyway, so you have that as the opening, but then bad stuff happened on and around Hawk Mountain because the French and Indian War was happening. So in 1755, you have the failed Braddock expedition out near Pittsburgh, and the French are winning. And then you get closer to our area, where you have the Lenni Lenape breaking their treaty, or their rule, I should say, like their connection with the Iroquois League of Nations, and they start openly going out and like guerrilla warfaring. And so you have the Penn's Creek Massacre, where they outright kill like, I think it was 21 people, and they take some into to slavery. And then they get to Hawk Mountain, and this book is pretty simple. The Hagenbach org goes further, but they talk about how in 1756, and so a year after what had happened at Penn's Creek, they start going ahead and attacking people at Hawk Mountain. And so it says the historical references of Indian raids in the area are simple but sobering, and they have a brief recording sample here. So in February 1756, so again, just like 6 months after the October attack on Penn's Creek, it says George Zeisloft and wife, 2 boys and a girl murdered. So that's a family of 5 just outright killed. Then June, Adam Trump found with a knife and a spear fixed to a pole 4 feet long in his body. And then Yeager and his wife and his children are killed. So you have this entire continual, like, these gruesome attacks happening from like 1756 all the way to like the end of 1758, really, in this area. But the most gruesome then is Hawk Mountain, which was the attack on the Gearhart family. And that's where the whole beginning of this sadness begins. So I'm actually going to switch over then to the Hagenbach story. But I do want to point out that if you want to read anything about this, my listeners out there, it's Hagenbuch, because it's hard to spell Germanic words if you're not from the area. Like Schuylkill is a fun spell if you're not from the area, and it's .org, but it's awesome. So it's called Schombacher's Tavern, a real ghost story, and so they have a better writing of what happened. So I'm going to quote from them. It says, "The story begins in February 1756 in the midst of the French and Indian War. Early one morning, a group of Lenape emerged from the forest that covered the Blue Mountains of Albany Township, Berks County, Pennsylvania. Allied with the French, they were intent on murdering colonial families living on the frontier. An account of the attack was documented in a letter from Jean Valentin Props to Jacob Levan. And so he says, I cannot omit writing about the dreadful circumstances of our township, Albany. The Indians came yesterday morning about 8 o'clock to Frederick Reichendorfer's house. These names sometimes will tell you what. As he was feeding his horses, 2 Indians ran upon him and followed him into the field 10 or 12 perches behind. But he escaped and ran toward Jacob Gearhart's house with the design to fetch arms. When he came near Gearhart's, he heard a lamentable cry, Lord Jesus, which made him run back towards his own house. But before he got quite home, he saw his house and stables in flames, and heard all the cattle bellowing, and thereupon he ran away again. 2 of his children were shot. One of them was found dead in his field. The other was found alive and brought to the Hagenbach's house, but died 3 hours after. All his grain and cattle were burnt up. At Jacob Gearhart's they had killed 1 man, 2 women, and 6 children. 2 children slipped under the bed, one of which was burned. The other escaped and ran a mile to get help from people. We desire help, or we must leave our homes." So that young person who ran away was Jacob Gearhart. And so he is raised as an orphan because his entire family is killed. But that land that was there was still his because it's a family land. And so you flash forward, and then he actually ends up building a tavern right there where he had basically been hidden in the trees, because he hid on Hawk Mountain and watched his family get murdered. That's what he unfortunately saw as he ran away. He watched that all happen. So for some reason, he decides to build a house right there. So he lives there, and again, a beautiful area, but he wasn't really right in the head after all that. No surprise. So he actually died in the early 1800s. He didn't live very long, and he sold everything to the Bullock family, and they kind of kept running the tavern because it was a great place to have a tavern at the time period. It helped buoy travelers who were stopping to give some food to their horses, stay over for a night, whatever. But then in the mid 1800s, so we're talking 1850s, the most interesting owners of all time buy it, Matthias and Margaret Schombacher. And as you mentioned, Kyle, their names are forever associated because Matthias is a pretty messed up human being. So what are some stories that you remember, PJ, of Matthias doing?
That he would get people all nice and sleepy, overfill them with food and drink.
I want to know what was in the food and the drink. What was he slipping them?
I mean, it could just be
just too much food.
Just
too
a lot
much
of food,
booze,
yeah. Just a food coma, and
I love food comas.
And then he would just kill them while they slept. There's a story of one guy who he was able to wake up in time, right? And saw him holding a butcher's knife over him.
So he out.
He was like, "Nope, I'm good."
And there was, Kyle mentioned, there is discussion of the possibility he had to get rid of the bodies, right? So there was a barn that no one could go to because, the horses weren't really even over there. It was that was his barn. And if you opened it, there's actually a story of a traveler who got to that barn.
It was a rainy night.
And it says, Matthias pointed out the barn where the horses could be stabled. As he approached the barn, the horses became spooked and reared up in terror. The impatient man threw down the reins and entered the barn himself. There he saw traces of fresh blood spattered about. The man decided he was better off continuing through the storm than spending the night at the tavern. But the barn is where Matthias would chop apart his victims because he had to get rid of the bodies. So he chopped them apart, and if he used it for some German bratwurst, yum, but he would just toss it on Hawk Mountain because bears and other animals
Well, I
would
do
take
remember
care
the
of it.
part about the well. They thought he was also dumping them
Yeah,
down the well.
there was a well
Yep.
that wasn't in use, and he
Yep.
would just dump things down there.
There was a smell around the well, too. Yeah, the well. Look at my house. These wells everywhere, people.
Well, I mean, in some defense, like it was one of those things where if you had a well on your property that dried up and you had to dig another one, that the old well usually became the refuse.
I know. Give me your trash pile. I
Yeah.
get it. Actually, people actually like to go into wells and go through that because the trash piles can have like expensive things. Maybe your porcelain cup broke, but it's worth money now. So
Yeah.
they actually like to dig in those refuse piles.
Yeah, so I mean, you take that with a grain. Like, I'm sure after they found out, he was doing these underhanded things.
They never knew.
No one ever found out.
This is all
that's
alleged.
part of it.
Okay.
No, well,
Isn't it?
But
So-
stories crop up. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, somebody, I knew that well smelled bad.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
That makes so much sense now.
well, the sausage story.
Yeah, remember, it's the 1750s, so
Yeah.
unless you catch the guy holding the knife and
That's-
cutting you, like, you're not going to get caught.
Yeah, and that's based on like one or two guys going like, "Hey, this sausage tastes like crap. What does yours taste like?"
Yeah,
Yeah, this sausage tastes weird, dude.
yeah, and the sausage story that we found was this. It was just one guy, and he tasted it and tasted weird, and then he realized there wasn't any cattle or pigs on the property.
He didn't keep any animals except for like a horse or two. So how
But
could he?
for me, like, I would never deduce that. I'd be like, well, he just ordered it from like the local town and it
be
went bad or
venison,
something. Venison, yeah.
bratwurst.
So like,
Doesn't have to be
I'm not
human.
sure if I buy that part.
This guy seems maniacal. I could see him.
I
we've
could
seen
see it.
Jeff Dahmer. Like I could see this
see
happen.
him doing it, but
These are the best brats on Hawk Mountain. The best brats on Hawk Mountain.
But you got to put it to like a polka. It has to be a 3-note. Yeah. So that was an interesting story. Also, travelers disappeared. And so that's where you have all this circumstantial evidence. Because, again, if you're not caught red-handed, you can't put them in jail because the bodies have disappeared because animals have eaten it or it's down the well and no one goes to the well. Go check out the freaking barn, but it's the rural area. You're not part of the major town, right? So no one really cares. Oh, you lost a traveler? No surprise, there's Native Americans out there. What can
and
you
like
do?
Kyle said, it's not like you had maps at this time.
Now, I can say for him, he bought this in the mid-1800s. So we're talking it's 1850s and on. So we're getting closer to like almost getting close to hopeful medicine. But
Yeah.
again, if you weren't caught red-handed, even if they're the 60s and 70s, if you weren't caught red-handed, it was hard to make a case. But circumstantially, travelers just disappeared. And so one major story I liked was there was this old peddler that came through, an old man, and he was selling all of this old Civil War stuff because it was post-Civil War. Of course, these are relics. He's putting them for sale. He just disappeared. And everybody knew this guy because he had gone to all the towns, all the houses. You know how peddlers worked in this time period. But he just disappeared. And then wouldn't you know it, a couple weeks later, Matthias is hawking Civil War gear down the local town.
Have a little priest.
So could he have been making extra money off of killing people? Absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
And if he sounds insane, so like, could he have been eating it? Yeah, because the one story you're talking about, it says, according to one story, a hungry traveler who stopped at the tavern was served a meal of so-called old German sausage. The traveler began eating, but found that the food didn't taste quite right. When he realized there were no pigs or livestock on the property, the man put two and two together. He figured that he might be the next in traveler's meal, and he made a hasty escape. So sure, we'll go with that. But there is a story of Feather Off, a man who went over to the barn because he heard some sounds of distress. As he got closer, Matthias just shows up, and he's holding like this hatchet. He's like, "Get away from my barn!" Murr. And Feather's like, "Okay, bye." So they did hear people like calling for help.
Yeah.
So again, find that story interesting. But what is really interesting about the whole thing is he was never charged with any crime because this was, the 1800s. He died in 1879. He died before the turn of the century. But if he had been convicted, at least 11 travelers had disappeared. So that would have made him literally the very first American serial killer. Fun fact.
and for this time period, it doesn't surprise me that he wouldn't be charged with anything because it's so hard to prove.
Yeah.
It's all he literally has to say is they moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were here. They stayed a night.
Mm-hmm.
And
I bought some of his stuff.
Well, and Hawk Mountain is notoriously unsafe.
Yeah,
because
he couldn't pay for his meal or his room.
He traded
So
some
he
Civil
traded
War
his-
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, he traded his
Yep.
merchandise.
Part of the story too, like in the book, not in this article so much, Hawk Mountain is very unsafe. There is a section of Hawk Mountain where, like, if you don't take the curve correctly, you're gone. So they could have just disappeared on the mountain. And of course, there are all number of, at this point it's 1879. There's not many Native Americans out there, but there are lots of animals that can get you too. So, traveling was very unsafe. However, there are rumors about his death. That on his deathbed, he begged to have a pastor come and relieve his sins because he confessed to all the murders. There's also a story that during the burial, as the pallbearers are carrying him out, a lightning struck and it scared them, and they dropped the casket, and his body was buried face down.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine he's on his deathbed. Father, I have to confess. I feel horrible, but first, have some wurst.
That base is not the best you've tasted.
Would you like hamburger?
Oh my god! I hear burgers are becoming a big thing.
Wiener?
Oh my
pork chops. He's just pulling out different cuts of meat.
How hungry are you? Anyway, but what's
Bacon.
interesting, what I thought would bring all of this to a close then, though, is on his deathbed, the rumor is, it says, one tells of how Matthias made a deathbed confession to the murders. In the confession, he claimed that an evil spirit on the mountain whispered to him day and night, encouraging him to act on murderous impulses. Perhaps it was the troubled spirit of Jacob Gearhart, or the displaced Lenape who once called Hawk Mountain their
It was
home.
a talking dog.
With no head! Best trick I ever taught him was talking.
It was a giant pig with glowing red eyes.
I knew it. I knew it.
Named Jody.
Oh,
That's an Amityville reference.
I was saying that part sounds very Amityville. The whole voices made me do it.
he wants to do Amityville in the worst way. I have not seen
I
that.
do, because the original Amityville, like the murders,
It's
are horrifying. They're creepy, and I feel there's something paranormal about them. And then the Warrens get involved, and that's a whole different story.
Well, there's a weird thing to that, and not to get into that obviously now, but there's a weird thing to that, to where it's one of those cases where it was real, then it was a hoax, and then it became real again. Because to this day, one of the Lutz's, one of the sons, swears that the things happened.
Huh.
Not exactly like they were in the book or the movie. He says a lot of that was embellished BS to sell the story.
Of course, yeah.
He said, but he's like, nobody is going to tell me I didn't get pushed down the stairs. Mm-hmm. And he says, and there's actually some evidence to this, that it's because George Lutz was into the occult, and that he knew about the murders before they moved in, that he lied and said he didn't, that he knew about them, and that was the reason he picked the house, was because he wanted to experiment.
All right, fine.
in the
We'll do
house.
Amityville and we'll bring Kyle on.
And we'll cut that part, and we'll talk about that next
No,
episode.
we'll keep it. We'll keep it.
But anyway,
that'll
so-
be our little like splice there, teaser
yeah.
for a couple weeks.
Little
from now.
sizzle, little sizzle reel. But
The sassy
that
sizzle
was-
with Shanna. Sorry, I'm still thinking up my little podcast thing for you.
Because the Ryan Reynolds remake, which was terrible, but had a really cool documentary on the murders. It was like a 20-minute documentary, 25 minutes, and it was really
It's
cool.
grisly. It really is.
which apparently George Lutz actually, he hates the original movie. He hates, but he even hated the Ryan. He was quoted by a friend as saying he hated the Ryan Reynolds version even more because it made him look like a bad dad. He's like, it made it look like it made it look like the way Ryan Reynolds portrayed him as if he like never really totally cared about the kids. And he's like, and that's just not true. I always loved the kids.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
So take that for what it's worth.
I will. Well, Matthias did not love the travelers. To put in that context,
Yeah.
exact
He
opposite.
didn't love the kids.
No, he did not.
Well, I mean, maybe his tum-tum.
He loved them in his meat grinder, and he loved their merch. Okay, so
Would you like the veal?
where are these cows? There are no cows.
Pork rinds.
Where are the pork? Where's the pig? So anyway, I believe if we're gonna go to like the whole like is it not haunted? I believe that there is something here at Hawk Mountain, because of just the bloodshed that existed. We live in an area like Jerseytown that is just full of all of these Native American skirmishes where death was just such a huge part of our early settlement. These rural communities were not protected at all. Even when Ben Franklin finally talked the Quaker Society into making our first militias to protect us from Native Americans, it was not helpful for us rural folk. It was helpful for the towns. So I think that something exists there, especially if Matthias did murder people. Listen, that's a lot of badness right up in there. That's going to have a lot of negativity and leave that little mark on your area. Your thoughts, PJ?
So what all paranormal happened there other than him hearing voices, though?
So you'll hear voices across the mountain itself, right? So you hear the ooh sounds.
Yeah.
People just disappear on the mountain, which could be because of just how unsafe it is. Okay. Let's see. I can find some stuff in here.
Because, like, yeah, sure, there's a bad history, but, like, that doesn't make me automatically think it's haunted.
I think. Drivers of motor coaches have an issue where their cars will just stall. And again, they can't.
I hate it when my motor coach just stalls.
I know, it's an old-fashioned
Like
word there.
automobile.
My automobile.
You get it out and you crank it, and it just won't turn over.
You'll hear people who are speaking only in German, and they sound really sad and depressed. Something there. Also, the tavern itself is haunted. It's said to have been haunted because of a deaf-mute girl that lived there. She fell down the steps by accident and she died. So the tavern itself.
9 Lieber, eine Bratwurst. 9 Lieber.
So, like, I mean, it's totally plausible that a place with that much horror would be.
So there's 80 participants on a ghost tour witnessed a totally unexplainable glow in the cemetery, which sprawled over the hillside beyond the Schumbacher's grave. So 80 people all saw a glow. That's right. Who would have thought? I knew it.
Swamp gas.
But it's mostly the tavern, because you'll see like lights flickering on and off. So in the tavern itself, light switches will flick up and down on their own. Faucets will turn themselves on and off. A bed vibrating, levitating. Strange beams of light extending from the floor to the ceiling of the conversations you'll hear in German sometimes. You'll hear the sound of the penny whistle from the deaf-mute girl who played it. Muted screams and the footsteps of which seem to come out of nowhere and gradually fade. You'll hear screams, of course, towards the barn area too. That's there. And of course, up on the mountains, you'll see a great white ghost bird. Yes.
A white fox, a white bird,
Foxbird.
spirit animals. Is that what they are?
So, yeah, I totally believe that a place with this kind of history would have some kind of activity going on in it. For sure.
Yeah, so it says, I mean, again, like for here, Hawk Mountain is not a hellhole of horror, though. It is a lovely, peaceful place with a world-class bird sanctuary, breathtaking scenery, and friendly people. However, trance mediums and other people have shown up there. And Jim Brett, the sanctuary curator, actually was quoted in talking about it. And he said, yeah, my grandfather was a powwow doctor. And once he took us kids to the furnace where he worked. And then he showed us all of that. And he, took us to the mountain too. So like you have that, it's again, that powwow doctor thing popping up again.
Yeah.
So it's more the tavern. So it's right there because the tavern's built on the mountain-ish. Like where, Gearhart watches somebody die. So again, I don't know if I'd build a house there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of people died there. So again, you're going to have hauntings because you have that place of disturbance, that place of horrible death, like a hanging or whatnot. So I think it could be true. Plus, I lived in a house. So
You lived in a house?
yeah, but now it's a cardboard box. I had to downsize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hence the no clothes. Just can't afford them. Had to hawk them. Matthias took them and stole them and sold them. Darn Matthias. What do you think, Kyle?
Well, I'm gonna base this off of the fact that it was having never been there, having not a whole lot of knowledge of any secondhand knowledge even necessarily of, like, I don't know anybody that's
Yeah.
been there and experienced
Yeah.
something.
Let's go.
But I will base it. I would say it's plausible to do a little MythBusters-esque. It's plausible because taverns as a whole tend to be. I think that because they're like a waypoint place, they're like a place where people are coming and going, and you're getting this, like, taverns in the sense of this time period. And even now, when you stay in certain places like this, it's not as prevalent now because you have like bed and breakfast, Airbnb,
Yeah.
regular hotels. But at this time period, there's a bit of a strange kind of energy or spirit to a tavern. People coming, people going, people, some people are experiencing intense moments of their lives in these taverns. And then you also have the local people who are just there all the time, And so coming from a place where, back where I live, and I think I mentioned this the last time I was here, we have the 1818 Tavern. And that's original to the area when it was, instead of Palmer Township, it was Sipesville. And during the Getter situation, all these, there's all these historic buildings, the old Sipe House, and the 1818 Tavern is one of them. And there's evidence that, back as far well into the past, it was a stopping point, some kind of an inn at the very least, where people could come, get a bite to eat, get their horses watered and fed. And at the time period, it was like another like day's ride to get into Easton proper. Like now, if you go down
So it
like
become a place to like train out your horses.
yeah,
and
if
get
you
them
go down
rested.
like 248 and down Northampton Street, you're in Easton in 5 minutes. But back then, it was like from the 1818, it was another day
Yeah.
to get down into Easton. So that was like the stopping off point coming down the old, what was it called? It used to have a name. What was it called? Before it was 248, it was like Old Northampton Road or something like that. And that was like the main thoroughfare to get into Easton from, up the way, Bethlehem, Allentown. Although there wouldn't have been an Allentown at that time. And the 1818 is haunted. They have experiences there. They've seen figures there. They have a chair that no matter how many times they put it back in the corner where it belongs, when they come in to open up the next day, it's in the center of the office.
Man.
So yeah, I mean, and that's the owner of, that's like the owner of the 1818 told me about the chair. He was like, and he was actually at the time a new owner. And I just happened to ask him, I'm sitting there drinking my beer, and I said, hey, Stemmy, it's now Stemmy's 1818. A little plug there for Stemmy's 1818.
We should get paid for that too.
I said, hey, Stemmy, I said, word is the place is haunted. And he, like, without missing a beat, he just looks at me and goes, oh, heck yeah. He goes, we got a chair that it won't stay put. He's like, no matter how many times you place it back where it belongs, it's in the middle of the room when you come in the morning, So if the 1818 can be haunted, and that was in a, for the most part, more well-developed area
Didn't have a guy making German
that hadn't,
sausages.
that hadn't seen murders, disappearances, killings, all this kind of stuff, then I think it's highly plausible that a place like this could easily be
Got a
haunted.
negative juju.
So that's my
Yep.
long-winded yes, I
Yes.
think it's
This
plausible.
is the Kyle show this week. No, it's okay. You're our guest. We like your ideas. Plus, you lived here. So I like going, when you were there, what did you do? Now, let's be honest. One last question. Did you bring your Ouija board up onto Hexenkopf?
No, we actually thought about it. We thought about it, and the determination was made that was a bad idea.
No.
It was in the car.
Yeah. Did you go up there before or after the pool incident?
Ooh, It's a good question.
It was in college, you said, right?
No.
This
This was high school. We went up there. I think it would have been after.
So we got smart. Got it. All right. We learned a thing or two because they'd seen a thing or two.
But I'll tell you, if I went back, you know what I would do?
No. Good Lord, no.
I would do the Estes method if I went back there now. You guys know
STDs?
No.
Listen, they're STIs now, but...
No, that's where you take a spirit box, one of those little units that like scans through all the radio frequencies like so fast, like it's like scanning through all the frequencies like, you know, so many times a second. And you put on noise canceling headphones and blindfolds, so then you can't hear like your partner, and the other person asks the questions that you can't hear. All you're hearing is the scanning, and then whatever you hear in the white noise of the scans,
you say it out loud.
You say it out loud, and you try to see if it matches the questions to see if you're getting like intelligent responses.
Sounds like I'm imagining like Sandra Bullock right now in Bird Box, like with the
so I don't want
eyes.
to. I don't want to use your podcast. I know for the most part you guys like warn people off like messing around with this. So, but that's one thing that I would love to try.
Well, because here's the thing. Before you said that, I was so proud of you for not taking the Ouija board up onto the mountain that I was going to say you're off the naughty list. But no, I'm like, nope, you're right back on.
Well, like how creepy would it be? You're blindfolded and you can't hear anything except, and then all of a sudden you hear, "Hi." I'm like, like, jeez.
Yeah, all you're hearing is like this. It's going through all of the radio frequencies like so many times a second. So you're just hearing like,
yeah.
And so
no,
there might be caca somewhere else if you hear the voice, but the idea being that it's scanning so fast that it eliminates that idea that you could pick up just random radio chatter because it's way too fast to pick up like a word or a phrase.
You gotta stop plugging this now.
So if you get a word or a phrase, it's got to be over so many frequencies that it would be impossible. And so if you hear a word or a phrase and it's all in the same voice, the idea is that
Kyle,
that would have to be
we don't condone
communication.
that on this website or this podcast. I'm going to cut you off now.
But I'm dying to do it.
Dying to do. Man, you speak with verbal irony sometimes. I would not be walking up there with that. So we're going to go to Hexenkopf on a different day when you're not doing that. But we'll all go to the Hawk Mountain together because it sounds
Hillview
lovely.
Manor.
Yeah, maybe I'll do it at Hillview Manor.
Oh,
No, we want to interview Carrie.
Carrie, if you're listening again.
Carrie, we will not do this.
We promise to not bring that. Although she'd probably be like, cool, bring it. Let's see what happens. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here, Kyle. We appreciate you and good luck on your podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate this being on.
I just love every time that you're on. All right.
Good times. Good times.
Please join us.
Kyle, you've been such an avid listener, and we really appreciate your input.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Is there anything you would like to share to the group, Shanna?
No, I just want to do my sign off.
This is Dr. Fraser Crane signing off.
NPR.
Anyway, so stay tuned for next week too, when we're going to discuss the Robert doll, I've decided. But for now, if you enjoy this podcast, listen to all of our other stories. Listen to Laura and Ray's stories, our Well House stories, hence the name of the podcast. Everyone's stories. Kyle's got some good ones. If you liked his smooth as jazz voice, he's got his own. It's called Kyle's on the Naughty List. All right. But we also have other podcasts. We have Games Overboard. That is our baby that started the whole thing. What's that about, PJ?
We review board games and talk about like all the fun stories they tell and things like that.
We also have our podcast, Danger and Dice, which we're going to start our whole campaign this coming week, which is exciting. Up until now, we've been doing one-offs. Yep. That's a fun story of our friends getting together and just doing some crazy antics through D&D. So have a lovely week.
Yep. Find us on Facebook.
I'll write that.
Check us out on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Send us emails.
We worked really hard on the Facebook until I forgot about it.
And click that bell.
Click that like and that share button. Watch our Facebook for upcoming giveaways. All right. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you next week.